Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
I noticed you guys are all probably on mute, and I appreciate that. We'll just get started in another minute, but we just want to welcome you and drop in the chat. Let us know where you're from, where you're joining us, and what brought you here.
We got someone from Detroit, a teacher and expecting mother. Thank you for
Ooh.
joining. And congratulations.
Yes, and all praise to you. Those must be two of the most difficult things.
Yep.
Ooh, we got a Canadian.
Oh, and a new EDI teacher leader. That's awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining.
Oh, so someone from the Minneapolis, Manhattan, Kansas. I know that because I grew up in Nebraska and I know my Big 12 football terminology.
Currently in a graduate course on culturally relevant pedagogy and learning as much as I can and expecting a third child. Congratulations. Ooh. That's great. We have a great crowd here. Thanks everyone for joining.
I see my mom's in the crowd. Hi, Ma.
Cool. Well, we'll just give it like one more minute or so before we get started in case there's any latecomers.
Yes. And just to let you know, we are recording this so that way you have access to it later. If you don't want to, I believe we have it set to where only the speakers will appear when the recording's happening. So, if you really don't want to be in it, just make sure to hide your video as most of you have already. And another thing is you have the option to put closed captioning on in case you're hearing impaired or just want to see the words that we're saying. So if you go to the base of your Zoom, there should be a button that says live transcript CC for closed captioning. You can click on that and click show subtitle, or there might be a button that says more and you can click show subtitles. And of course, in the recording, we'll have subtitles on everything.
Yeah, and we'll send out a link to the recording via email that we have from the registration after the event. So you'll hear from us then. But okay, I think Rajiv, we can probably get started. Do you want to kick things off?
Yes. So welcome everyone to Big Issues, Little Learners. We are here to create dialogue with kids about diversity and identity. Just to let you know a little about us, Historicons, we're sponsoring this event. Feel free to follow us at Historicons on every single platform. And we are a startup. We're a grassroots movement created by two friends who had a vision to increase representation in our toys and games. We make one-of-a-kind games that educate and empower kids using diverse events in history, typically ones that have been overlooked in our textbooks. So our first collection of puzzles that we've made are designed by me and me, the designer, Rose, who is a neuroscientist, and Deonna, who is our education consultant. And they're meant to spark dialogue between kids and their adults on diversity and identity. So we're very excited to kind of show you what we've created, but more importantly, kind of talk to you about why we're doing this. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I am an architect turned illustrator, and I go by the moniker Little Icon. I'm also a co-founder of Historicons. I've published a few children's books, and what I bring to this table is, as an architect, I learned how to build large things using small components. And so that's what I'm bringing to the table here, of creating small elements inside these puzzles, whether they're the shapes of the puzzles or the imagery, to kind of create a larger story, something that we can take in at a large scale, but also appreciate the small elements. So one of the puzzles that I curated is the Stonewall Uprising. Why? Because as a queer person, I didn't have this type of representation growing up, and who knows what my destiny could have been with this. So we want to be able to provide the exposure to kids based on diverse identity traits. And, you know, the more exposure there is, the more opportunities there are for them. So I'll pass it off to Rose to tell you a little bit about her role.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. I'm Dr. Rose Perry, and I'm a developmental neuroscientist, as Rajiv said, and I'm an applied psychologist. And I've spent over a decade working in academia, studying child development and working with families. And I now spend most of my time taking what we know from the science of research and child development and infusing it into the design of products and services for families to promote healthy and enriched child development. And Historicons is an incredibly important project to me for a number of reasons, which is why Rajiv and I came together to co-found it, not only because of my research background, but also because of my personal background. I was born with a rare form of dwarfism called Russell Silver dwarfism. You can't really tell on Zoom, which has been an interesting experience in general. But as a child, my family and I did not really have access to resources that could help encourage discussion of my disability and identity growing up with a disability. And I wish that we would have had those resources. I know how empowering and important it is to have these discussions, both for children with disabilities, but also for children without disabilities, to encourage positive social interactions with kids who might not look the same as them. So I'm really excited to talk a bit today with you all about how families can begin to broach these topics of discussion around diversity and identity. And then our third team member is Deonna Smith. She's running a little late, but she will hopefully be able to jump on here soon. I know I see in the chat that some of you heard about the event because of Deonna. I'm sure there's some fans in the audience. She's awesome. Her Instagram handle is up here, but she specializes in anti-bias, anti-racist education, and she works in school administration. And she's just been an invaluable member of the team. And yeah, hopefully you'll get to hear from her a bit later on in this event. But for now, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and just to let you know, I actually just learned this term recently, was anti-bias, anti-racist, or ABAR. So if you hear anyone refer to ABAR education, that's what it's referring to. So why are we even doing this? So Rose and I, we put out a survey early on asking parents, like, what are they looking for? Oh, do you know what? Look who just arrived.
Here comes Deonna, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
But before we tell you why we're doing this, we're gonna have our lovely consultant, Deonna, just introduce herself.
All we had to do was say her name.
Exactly.
Well, it says she's joining. For any of you new, I know we had some latecomers jump on. We'd love to hear where you're from and how you heard about the event, if you don't mind sharing in the chat. Rajiv and I are both based in Brooklyn, and we're the co-founders of Historicons. Oh, it looks like Deonna, it says joining. She might be having, oh, there we go.
Okay.
Hi, Deonna.
Hello. Thank you.
You're right on time.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Deonna Smith. I apologize. I'm a little bit late. I was actually wrapping up my daughter's parent-teacher conference and it went a little bit over. But thank you so much for all of your patience. My name is Deonna Smith. I am an ABAR education specialist consultant activist based in Los Angeles. I was a teacher for many, many years, and now I work with schools all across the country and organizations that are interested in bringing this equity work to life and actualizing some of our goals around anti-racist and anti-bias education.
Fantastic. So let's get back to why we're even doing this. So Rose and I, we wish we had this representation. So we asked a bunch of parents and educators, like, what do you guys think? And so 90% of parents said they want toys and games that reflect diversity, but only 60% of the parents felt prepared to talk about topics of diversity and identity. And up to the age of 5 years old, only 50% of parents began to discuss identity traits with their kids. So we thought, can we create a tool and have events like this that can, help foster these discussions? So we're going to start the discussion right now. So the first question we're going to pose to our panel, and if you have questions, please just drop them into the chat, and we're going to make sure to address them either along as we go or at the end. All right. So at what age can you start talking about diversity and identity with kids?
Yeah, so I can start answering this one, and then would love for Deonna to chime in. Get this question a lot. It's a good question. Thank you, Rajiv. I want to start off by acknowledging that I understand having these conversations can feel really daunting and sometimes even heavy. So we acknowledge that. But the long story short is it's never too early to start having these discussions. I think it's really important to have them early and often because if your kids don't learn from you about topics of diversity and identity, they're going to learn from others and what they observe going on in the world. And unfortunately, I think most of us are here because we know what's going on in the world includes a lot of racist, prejudiced, biased ways of thinking and behaving. So we need to actively be countering those messages. And it's important for kids to have these conversations in the home with a trusted adult. So they're learning from someone that they really trust as much as possible. And that's just going to also help you be more likely to avoid them asking questions in a public situation that might be, embarrassing or humiliating, even for some people involved. I know as someone who's very small and looks different, I have kids stop all the time and say things to me that I know I'm used to it, so it's okay, but parents are really embarrassed when that happens. And I think just having these conversations in the home can help quite a bit. There's also a lot of research on how early kids are really observant and smart, and how early kids start to notice differences in the world in terms of racial differences, gender differences, lots of stuff like that. We actually have a figure. Deonna, I'd love to pass over to you to kind of to weigh in and talk about this graph.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes. So I think it's always on parents' minds, right? When is too early? How do I talk about it? I don't want to traumatize my child. I don't want to put ideas in their head, right? And I think I get a lot of parents that come from a really good place that are wanting to delay that conversation. But if we look here, we can actually see that it really is never too early to start talking about identity and these issues. So if you check this out here, it says at birth, babies look equally at faces of all races. But by 3 months, babies are looking more at faces that match the race of their caregivers. And that's to be expected, right? If you're around people all day, that's the people that you're used to seeing. I always tell this funny story. I genuinely can always tell when I'm the first Black person that a baby has seen, because they're just not quite sure what to do. They're like, wow, this is kind of shocking, right? So kids are not, if they're not exposed to that, they're starting to recognize that as they get earlier and being more comfortable with people that look like them. Then kids as young as 2 start to use race to reason about people's behaviors. They start connecting behaviors to races, and this is based on their exposure, which is why what Rose said about, if you don't tell them about it, they're going to learn from TV. I mean, just to peruse, not even through the news, but just through, regular TV, Netflix, you'll see there are a lot of really harmful, stereotypical ideas that are being reinforced in the media about race. And so that's why this one is so troubling, because kids are using race to reason about behaviors, but they might only be exposed to what they see on TV, which will present one very particular story, right? About whether it's people who are differently abled, people who are a different race, LGBTQ, whatever it is, kids are only getting that information from one source. By 30 months, most kids use race to choose playmates. So at this point in time, our kids are interacting with each other, they're being social, and they're internalizing those messages, and they're deciding who they're spending time with based on who looks at them, or who looks like them, and who they connect those behaviors to. And expressions of racial prejudice often peak at ages 4 and 5. And this is something that any preschool kindergartner teacher will tell you. Kids are really starting to notice. And because they don't yet understand a lot of the complexities of behavior, they're taking these really essentialist messages, right? They're really only connecting one story. You know, we talk about the danger of a single story, but when you're 4 years old, it's kind of hard to hold nuanced ideas about different types of people. So we say this because I think parents are thinking maybe because our kids aren't vocalizing their thoughts about race, or they're not like saying things that make us think, wow, you know, you're definitely thinking about it, but what's going on in here, the wheels are definitely turning.
No, I see there's a great question that was just posed in the chat. It says, Natasha asked, what if you are mixed race? Where and who do you identify with?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I have a little bit of personal experience with this, just in my own family, right? Of knowing that a lot of babies that are mixed race can have a variety of pigmentation and look a lot of different ways. And in my experience, you know, kids don't really understand super complicated ideas about race, but a mixed race child typically understands like, this is one, you know, this is one race and this is the other. So they might like see two, but are not often like identifying like very nuanced multiple, oh, you're biracial, right? They're kind of seeing things, no pun intended, in black and white. But I think that, you know, for mixed race families, that provides such a great opportunity because you are able to, from, you know, the get-go kind of explain like, look at our family, look at the diversity that we have, and look what's happening. And I think that that's what we see a lot, right? Is for people where race is more salient, or ability is salient, or sexual expression or identity is salient, those kids talk about it because they know to recognize it. So a lot of kids of color, right, might have more familiarity with race because they understand that it's a thing because it pertains to them directly. And so that's why it's important, like, to talk about difference, even if you don't, like, even if there aren't any LGBTQ people in your family, right? That's almost even more of a reason to talk about it because your kids might not get that exposure firsthand.
I have a follow-up question. So there's this idea of like code switching where, you know, people will act like in a different way based on, you know, how they relate to someone else. Do you think, is that like a healthy type of behavior, or like, should we just act the same, you know, with everyone?
I think for kids, code switching is a very necessary adaptation they often feel. So I think that kids kind of, especially when they get to school, are socialized into behaving in a certain type of way, whether that's like, if you're a kid who identifies, right, as maybe, you know, gay or lesbian, I'm sure you're learning a lot of things about pretending to be straight at school. And if you're a kid that is from a certain neighborhood, right, you're learning a lot of things about pretending to be, you know, normal at school. So I think it is an adaptation that a lot of folks make from a survival perspective, and it does have a lot of material benefits. But I think from an ideological perspective, of course, I would love to see a time where you're able to bring your full and complete self to whatever situation and be welcomed with open arms. But I understand the necessity of it at times. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think we're going to get a concrete answer on everything, but definitely, like, I think that's a great perspective. All right, I want to move on to the next question that we have posed. And sorry, Rose, you're on mute.
Uh-oh, no, we can't hear you. It looks like you're still on mute, Rose.
Ruh-roh. But why don't we go to the next question and we can.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Let's see. Uh-oh. The thing is frozen. Let me see if I can switch to presenter mode here. You would think after a year and a half of performing on Zoom, these kinks would be all worked out.
Yes, and thank you all for, please drop more questions if you're looking. It gives you another second to look at this graphic here.
I think she's good now. Rose?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay!
Okay, it was saying I was unmute the whole time, so I think my computer is being really weird on my end. Thank you all. I just wanted to add one thing to that last question really quick, if that's okay. That I think it's important to highlight also that it's important to have these conversations early for promoting positive identity development in general. I think, you know, especially when we think about topics like LGBTQ, you might not know how your child is going to identify as they get older, and having these conversations early is really, really important and helps them feel comfortable to continue to have those discussions as they get older. So I just wanted to make that point as well before we move on to the second question. I won't mute myself again so I don't get stuck.
Thank you. Should we go to the next question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Yeah, this is it, Rajiv, the one. Can you see it on your side? Really? Okay.
Yeah, your computer might be frozen.
The slides aren't switching for you right now?
While you figure that out, I'll pose the next question. So how do I begin having discussions about identity and diversity with my young kid?
For me, I would say I always like to start with books. I love to start with literature. I think building early literacy is also something that can really be impactful for our students and our kids. So to start those conversations, you know, I think it can be intimidating if you feel like you have to come up with the whole beginning and ending conversation all by yourself. So sometimes it's fun to find a book, maybe to talk about a movie character, to use a historical figure as an example, because as parents, you know, we're not necessarily experts in all of this, right? So it's helpful to lean on other tools and resources to start that conversation. Another thing that I would say, just as a disclaimer, is that you probably will say the wrong thing at a certain time. Like you will probably put your foot in your mouth. You will probably not have the perfect answer. Like sometimes a kid will ask, well, like, why? You know, well, what does it mean to be white? And it's like, it's a great question. You know, I can Google and come back to that. So don't get discouraged if it doesn't go super smoothly the first couple of times, or if you need to tell your child, like, let's learn more about that together, because you're right, I don't know. And then find some outside resources that you can bring in, because I know our kids look to us like we have all of the answers and all of the perfect things to say, but the reality is we don't. So I would say that would be my first tip of where to start.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Deonna said. I think leveraging teachable moments and being on the lookout for teachable moments is really like the overarching way that I would answer this. Kids are naturally really curious and inquisitive. They ask a lot of questions, and I know it can be tempting at times to just not kind of dive into an answer that might be, you know, going to take a little bit of time, but I think those are the perfect times to have those discussions. And through play, to Deonna's point too, in terms of like being really mindful about what you have in your kid's house in terms of toys and books and media that they're exposed to. Kids process their social world through play. So as much as you can incorporate diversity and representation in play, the better off they're going to be. So I think that's also just really important. And, you know, we designed Historicon puzzles with that in mind, to really serve as a jumping off point to have these discussions in a way that doesn't feel so daunting. And if you check out the design of our puzzles, you'll notice we have a lot of clues and the puzzle shapes and Easter eggs embedded into the design. And they're there to try to really get kids to ask questions. And we send them kind of on a hunt of discovery with the puzzles in terms of figuring out who's the who, what, when, where, and why behind the historic event that's depicted. And those cues, the clues and the shapes then serve as a perfect opportunity to kind of bridge into a more serious conversation around what does it mean if two men are holding hands? Like we have a puzzle piece that's that shape, for example. Deonna was just watching, I think, our clue key. Yep, and then she's got
the clue key. Got some clues here.
There's a great question that was just posed from Aubrey. It says, do you have tips on books and resources to begin?
Along with that. Yes, I mean, I have a long list of books. Maybe we could include that in the email list. I can send out my book recommendations. So if you all are on the email list, keep a lookout for that. I can send you kind of my starter kit that I always use for my libraries. I have like a fat library behind me back here, and it's got some of my favorites up there as well. So I think that's really helpful. I would say that there's a lot of things, a lot of other people on Instagram, like resources, folks that this is really their thing, talking about this work with kids. And so I could recommend a couple. Maybe I could just put together like a little recommendations bundle for our email list. But I would say like, I would start with books. One person I know in particular is Nick called Woke Kindergarten on Instagram, and they have really good resources. And I think a lot of it is, like Rose said, preparing. So for the teachable moments, because the kids probably will say something or hear something out of the corner of your ear. So even if you're like, I don't know if I need to talk to my kid about this yet, it might be helpful to like peruse and get prepared and kind of psych yourself up and figure out what you would say and anticipate some scenarios. That way, when they come to you, you're ready for it. So those can be great resources to start with.
Yeah, and we're trying to fix the slides. So, but at the very end of this presentation, if we don't fix the slides during this, we have a list of resources also of just good websites to help kind of guide discussions around all these things. So we'll make sure that we include that also in the email. But I love your idea, Deonna, to share specific books and media ideas as well. So we'll get that all to you all in the follow-up.
Do you see the slideshow now? Or can you see it on my frame?
No, I still see the same.
Oh, weird.
I can see the new one.
Oh,
you
okay,
can
so
see the
maybe
new
it's
one?
me. Okay.
Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share that again.
Oh, perfect. Okay, everyone's good but me, so ignore me. We're good.
Yeah, I can't see it either, but as long as you tell me what slide you're on, Rajiv, then we're good.
Okay, so right now we're just showing what we created to kind of answer this question. This is our puzzle that has custom clue shapes, and these custom clue shapes tell elements of the story. So that way you're not getting this long written history, you're getting like vignettes, you're getting these, you're acting as a historian, putting these clues together to piece together an entire event.
Cool. Yep, and each of those are just a really good, even saying like, what do you think this shape means is one way you can initiate conversations around these things, right? So it just can feel a little less daunting and more natural in the day-to-day.
Right. So, okay, the next question we have is, how do you handle issues that don't have a happy ending?
Deonna, do you want to start this one? I'll chime in then.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's such a great question, because what I also experience is a lot of families feel like when they talk about issues of diversity or difference, it's all gloom and doom. And so what I always encourage people to remember is there are so many beautiful stories of joy and hope and resistance and celebration. And there's so many ways to expose your kids to difference that don't involve the way that folks who have been historically marginalized have experienced oppression. So I would say the first thing is, you don't have to only tell the stories that don't have a happy ending. Even as much as going to a cultural center, going to a different museum, experiencing the music, experiencing the food, a lot of that is a great start, especially for younger kids. And then I think when you're dealing with stories that don't have a happy ending, for me, what I do with my kids that always feels good is wrapping it up with like, okay, this is how it ended, but how can we contribute? What can we do to like push forward on progress for this issue? So for me, last year with my kids, we were out protesting many, many days last year because we were talking about the legacy of racism in this country. And they were like, well, what can we do? I was like, well, let's go out there. Let's take it to the streets, right? And I did the Historicons Stonewall puzzle with my daughter a couple days ago, and we've done it like twice because she wants to try to do it all herself. So I just like kind of watch at the back. And so we've talked about like, well, do we know any LGBTQ plus people? I mean, are there people that you want to learn about? Can we research more? Can we learn about, you know, there's kind of a revival around some of the icons that are in the Historicons puzzle right now, actually, of people telling this story. So she got more interested in it and she wants to learn more about Marsha P. Johnson. And we want to figure out if there's like a local agency that we can support. So that, you know, there's of course sad stories in history. And that's part of the reason why it's so important to tell that story, because it has been left out and there has been so much injustice. But I always end it with like, this is what we can do. And this is how we can be activists, or this is how we can participate. And it not only like gets kids feeling like, okay, you know, there can be a better ending, but also it builds in that internal sense of agency where like, you know, as people who have been oppressed, we can do something, we can push back.
I love that. I think that's such a good approach, is like, what can we actually do? Deonna is the queen of translating learning into action like that. So thank you, Deonna. I will echo a lot of what Deonna said. I think that when you have stories that have unhappy endings, and you know, I think it is important to be honest about it in an age appropriate way. You know when your kid is ready to handle these sorts of things, right? And you know what language will be okay for them. I do think it's important that we don't, you know, keep these stories hidden up. But there's always, I think, a way to balance these stories, as Deonna was saying, or even find subplots within stories that don't always have happy endings, with messages of joy, with messages of pride, resistance and progress, hope. You can always find like evidence, almost always find some evidence of community allies, like who are the helpers. And I think when you can balance, you know, yes, there's some really terrible things that have happened that are have unhappy endings, with messages of pride, hope, and resistance, that also helps quite a bit in kind of breaking down these tougher stories. But yeah, that's a good question, one that I'm sure Deonna and I get all the time. But yeah, just remember, you know your kid best. I think that's important to keep in mind in terms of what words to use when describing these sorts of things.
Yeah, and so you know, part of what we're doing this is there are a lot of benefits to this. And if you're able to see the new slide on the screen, are you?
I can't.
No, okay. So we just kind of want to write the benefits of like the 3 topics that each of us curated. You know, conversations with 5 to 7-year-olds about interracial friendships can dramatically improve their racial attitude in just 1 week. So just simple exposure is going to, you know, create positive dialogue. With regards to people with disabilities, you know, exposure to their stories promotes more positive attitudes towards people with disabilities. And students in LGBT inclusive curriculum are 82% more likely to accept LGBTQ plus people than those without LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum. So, but the bottom line is, the more exposure, the more accepting and open kids will be. I mean, that's a very macro way of putting it.
Yeah, these benefits that Rajiv just went through are all based on peer-reviewed publications and studies, and we can share the citations for them in the email that goes out as well, in case you want to dig a little deeper. But these are just 3 examples of many studies that are out there about all the positive benefits of having these conversations early and often with kids.
Right. Okay, and we have a bunch of resources. I have listed them on screen. If you're not able to see them, do not worry. We're going to send you a link to all of these. It's a long list, from teachingtolerance.org to GLAD and PFLAG and Aorta Cooperative. There's so many resources out there that many of us haven't tapped into. And of course, another resource is Historicons, us. You know, one thing we want to show you is if we could try to do a little bit of a demo of it. If Deonna, can you hold up portions of the puzzle for everyone to see?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll hold up some chunks so you guys can see. It won't be all together, but I'll give you a couple little chunks here. It's been on my fridge, so I love that it's magnetic because it's been on my fridge for a couple of days. So the kids have like really enjoyed like pointing out the people to me when they go to get their snacks. But here's a little snippet of some of the puzzle. I don't know the best way to do this, but hopefully you can see this. So it's like a regular kind of puzzle like experience. When you first get it, you're kind of like, okay, this is like a basic puzzle. But what I think is the best part is that the little Easter eggs that are the shapes, and the little clues that tell you about how each shape is relevant to the story. So that part, is fun because the kids put it together. And then once they kind of see like, oh, why is there an apple? And you get to talk about like, oh, why is there an apple? Or they're like, okay, why are, the two boys holding hands? Or what does the heart mean? So there's all of those little icons that tell you a little bit more about what's happening in the story. And then once you're all through and, you put it together, and I think the great thing is you can do it multiple times, right? You can kind of like guide the kids and then they can try to do it on their own and you can talk about it. But the best part is the QR code that you scan at the end, and that's what links you to all of the other online resources. So how I imagine using this and how I've used it with my kids was like really letting them lead and say, okay, I want to put together this puzzle, and then kind of priming them and prepping them. And then I go to the online resources and talk more about kind of like the deeper stuff. Like, okay, we put together this puzzle and it's pretty and it's cool. And there's got all these like cool looking people, but like, this is a really historical significant event. So let's have another chat about that. So that's how I've been using it so far. I don't know, is there any more questions about it? Do you want to see some more chunks?
Yeah, I just dropped a link to our, not to make this a product promotion, but a link to our Kickstarter, because we just released our first collection. And the only way we get to bring it to life is if we can back our entire project. But there's been a lot of design and science and research that's gone into it, because we didn't want to just provide a simple run-of-the-mill project. We wanted to provide something that's really going to work for you. And we did months of product testing, and we completely revamped it from this summer because we wanted to make it something that was fun, but more importantly, that was educational. So we have a video on that link that I just sent you, which kind of tells our story in a very visually beautiful way. So we'd love for you to check it out. And, one of the main things, as Deonna mentioned, is there are going to be a lot of resources on the Historicons site, including more events like this. So just a little promo. If you do back us on Kickstarter, you'll be added for special access to a listserv for more free events like this. And we'll delve more into specific topics like how to have conversations about race, sexual orientation, and disability with your kids. And as always, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what stories you would like to see, because as we grow, we want to add more stories that reflect our diverse audience. So as much as you can engage with us, I think that's just going to make what we're doing a better tool for everyone out there.
Yeah, and the resources online include, we include descriptions of the historical event that are in kid-friendly terms, but also dive in a little bit deeper for adults who want to learn. As well, I know that the three of us learned a lot of things that we didn't know, even just making these puzzles. So when we've heard that a lot from our product testers, that the parents and grandparents have had just as much of a good time learning as they play. But also we include discussion guides, discussion questions. You get a whole lot more than just the puzzle, I guess is the point. So yeah, we hope you check us out. And if you can help spread the word at all, we hope we can bring these to life. I think we have a few extra minutes if anyone has any more questions about anything. at all. I can't see the chat because my computer is apparently just not cooperating, but
I have my eyes on the chat, but also if you want to just turn on your mic and ask a question, please go ahead and do that. And we'll work up. We did a crash run earlier today of running this presentation, and it worked. So, you know, this is 2021 for you. Oh, so Cindy asked, how close are we to reaching our goal? So
Good question, Cindy.
with 7 days left, we are just a little less than $10,000 away, but that means we're over 70% funded. You know, this is like, okay, we haven't been learning just about these diverse events in history. We've also been learning about business, and you know, this is something that we prepared for as much as we could, but we were just kind of thrown into a lion's den. So, you know, any support that we get from you, you don't understand how appreciative we are of it. It means the world. It means that you're willing to back this without actually seeing the physical product. We only have one prototype that we were able to make, and it traveled.
It's very nice though.
It traveled from me making silly TikToks of it all the way over to Deonna to kind of showcase it with her daughter. And you know, once we get the full collection out and you guys are using it hand in hand, we really hope that you get a lot out of it and can share it with other people. And I got another question from Maria asking, this has been a very informative presentation. Great job, Rose and Deonna. And yes, this is recorded, and you will be able to, you know, share with other people. But you know, like we said before, we want to create a close-knit community with you. So if you want to be like the first ones to access this content and be part of the conversation, you know, please, you know, back us and join our listserv, and we'll definitely make sure that, you know, we highlight your questions.
Yeah, and we'll be doing more of these. I think I'm really excited to get very in depth as well with like, what if my kid asked this very specific question? What are some ways you can respond? So we definitely want to dive even deeper than we did today. I think this was a really good kind of overview of how to begin to have these conversations.
We have a great question here from Julia. It says, do you have suggestions on how teachers might utilize the puzzles in their classroom?
Oh, do we ever?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Julia. So I'm a teacher, and a lot of my why for coming on to this project was because I just felt like I had so much desire to do this type of work, and it was really hard to figure out how it could actually work in a classroom when you've got like 30 kids and they're running around and it's crazy. So how I planned on initially using this, and I know Rose has some ideas too, because she works with some teachers as well, but I really see this as a really great tool for centers, especially because there's so much that the kids can do by themselves. So it can be like a learn together thing. It can be a semi-independent thing. So how I see teachers using it is having a center with other ABAR resources where kids are exploring. I think it can be a great resource to use in, you know, our specific months where we focus on different groups. So that's why when I came on, I was like, we got to get a Black History Month puzzle. Like, we just got to get one. So I feel like that is a really great opportunity, and it starts that conversation. I can see kids, you know, digging in and doing collaborative learning with each other. And then also, I think that there's a resource, right, that comes with this, which is a lesson plan, which really gives you some prompts and some really good questions that you can lead a discussion once kids do put it together, because like the puzzle piece is fun and that's one thing, but we really want to talk about the learning. So we've included some discussion questions and a guide for how can you have like a really strong conversation around this as a teacher as well. So that's what I would say, but I know Rose has some things as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad that somebody asked. If you look on our Kickstarter, we have some specific rewards that are called educator either an educator pack or educator collection. And if you purchase one of those rewards, you get, as Deonna was mentioning, included lesson plans, worksheets, and activities that make the puzzle very plug and play into a classroom environment. And you'll also, with the educator pack, get more than one way to play the game of the puzzle. So we have a few different suggested ways to play. And we've put together some ways to play specifically in a classroom environment that are really, really fun. The number of pieces in each puzzle is always more than 30 players. So we've got creative with how you can make this really interactive and every child in the class get involved. But yeah, we're super excited to hear more from teachers as they use the product, but we've designed them for use in the home and for use in classrooms specifically. And we'll be doing an Instagram Live tomorrow on Deonna's, at Deonna Smith, at Deonna's Instagram. And we're going to be talking even more about how the puzzle was made for educators. So please join us 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time if you want to hear more about that.
And we are running a little late on time, but I saw one question in here that I'd like to add on because I think it's a fantastic question. It says, do you have suggestions on how to talk to parents of students who are hesitant about these resources?
Yeah, that's always a great question. I think that most of it is just like fear about what you're going to say. So I think like being really transparent and saying this is, a product that has been, it's based on research that is coming in to help enhance our conversation. I think that is really helpful, starting with that. It's not, just the teacher's opinions. Like this is, a research-based tool to really guide the learning. And I think being super honest and transparent, like saying, I'd love for you to come in and interact with some of the material, right? Because all of this stuff here is based on historical events that happened. So it's really more than anything, it's like a social studies tool. It's not necessarily, we don't do like current events type of thing. So it's all based on things that have happened and stories that have been historically left out of the narrative. And so I think that starting there is really helpful. And just letting them see that it's really kid-led. So it's not teacher-led where the teacher's like telling you, this is what you should think and this is what happened. The kids are engaging and interacting with the puzzle and doing their own kind of research and exploring. I think those can be helpful things, but I definitely know that there are always those parents that are hesitant. So send them the website, let them see for themselves too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think too, like I've had some success working with people who are a little bit hesitant, but I think when you really get to the heart with a lot of hesitancy, it's around whether it's age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. It's not that they don't necessarily want their kids to ever learn about this. It's just they might want to wait till they're 16 or older. So I think also, showing that these resources are age appropriate and developmentally appropriate is helpful. But these are sorts of things that we can create guides for this and upload them on Historicons. So I think this is a great question. And I want to now work on a guide to like address hesitancy so that if you get a Historicons puzzle, you get resources like that as well. But yeah, great question.
Yeah, so with that, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us and powering, Historicons shows stories of resilience. And I think this Zoom meeting was a presentation of resilience because we dealt with obstacles and difficulties, but we powered through. I thought we had a wonderful conversation. And once again, I hope you join us and help us build more stories out there to educate and empower more kids.
Thank you so much for joining, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.